She knows he's dangerous. She's seen him dismiss others without a flicker of remorse. She's watched him operate with a coldness that should repel any rational person. And still, she cannot stop thinking about him. Still, she finds herself drawn closer. Still, she feels something ignite in her chest when he enters a room. This is not a malfunction. This is not damage. This is 6 million years of evolutionary programming running exactly as designed. David Buss spent decades researching what he calls the dark triad of attraction. What he discovered disturbed the academic community so deeply that most of it never reached mainstream discussion because the truth is uncomfortable. The truth suggests that the qualities we publicly condemn are privately ripped. That the behavior society punishes in daylight become magnetic in the shadows. By the end of this, you will understand the precise neurological and evolutionary mechanisms that make certain women powerless against cruel men. You will see the hidden logic behind choices that appear self-destructive, and you will possess knowledge that rewrites everything you thought you knew about what women truly want versus what they claim to want. But there is one specific mechanism, the darkest of them all, that explains why the most intelligent, most successful, most self-aware women fall hardest for men who should terrify them. When you understand it, the world will never look the same. Let us begin with what Buss called the protection paradox. The year was 1462. Wallachia, a small principality crushed between the Ottoman Empire and Hungarian aggression. Ruling this territory was a man whose name would become synonymous with horror. Vlad III, known to history as Vlad the Impaler. His methods were legendary in their brutality. Forests of impaled bodies, diplomatic envoys nailed to their own heads, entire villages erased as warnings to his enemies. And his second wife, Maria of Wallachia, threw herself from the tower of Poinari Castle, rather than be captured by Turkish forces. Not to escape, to remain loyal to him even in death. Contemporary accounts describe her devotion as absolute, bordering on worship. How does a woman love a monster? The answer lives in the oldest part of the female brain, the part that evolved when survival was not guaranteed. When the difference between life and death often depended on a single variable, which man claimed you as his own? The protection paradox works like this. A woman's unconscious mind does not evaluate a man based on his kindness. It evaluates him based on his capacity for violence directed outward. The question her ancient brain asks is not, is he gentle? The question is, if danger comes, can he destroy it? The cruel man answers this question without words. His willingness to harm others becomes evidence of his ability to protect. His lack of remorse becomes proof that he will not hesitate when hesitation means death. Buss documented this in his research on mate preferences across 37 cultures. Women consistently rated ability to provide protection as more important than kindness, than sensitivity, than emotional availability. And not slightly more important, dramatically more important. But here is where it becomes darker. The protection must be paired with a specific asymmetry. She must feel that his cruelty would never turn inward, that she exists in a protected space while the rest of the world burns. This creates what psychologists call selective safety. She is the exception. She is special. She has tamed something untamable. This dynamic explains why the man who dismisses others but focuses intently on her creates such powerful attraction. The contrast itself becomes intoxicating. His coldness to the world versus his heat for her. His indifference to other women versus his focused attention on her. The ordinary man offers universal kindness. He is warm to everyone, safe with everyone. And precisely because of this, he communicates nothing about his capacity to protect her specifically. He is not selective. He's not dangerous. And therefore, he is not desirable at the deepest biological level. The strategic man understands that his value is communicated not through consistent gentleness, but through calibrated ruthlessness, warmth reserved, coldness deployed, protection implied. There is a second mechanism that operates beneath conscious awareness. Buss called it resource acquisition potential. In the ancestral environment, resources meant survival, food, shelter, territory. The man who could acquire these resources determined whether your children lived or died. And here is the uncomfortable truth that evolutionary psychology reveals. The traits that enable resource acquisition are often the same traits we label as cruel: dominance, aggression, willingness to take from others, lack of guilt when taking, strategic deception, cold calculation. These are the tools of empire builders, conquerors, successful predators. Consider Hernán Cortés. With 600 men, he conquered an empire of millions. His methods included massacres, manipulation of native alliances, and calculated betrayals. By any modern moral framework, he was a monster. By evolutionary metrics, he was the ultimate provider. His men became wealthy beyond imagination. The women who allied with him, including Lama Lynch, who became his interpreter and lover, gained access to resources unavailable through any other means. History does not record her resistance to his brutality. It records her devotion. This is not an endorsement. This is an observation. The female brain evolved in a world where nice men often starved and cruel men often thrived. Those women who selected for kindness over capability frequently watched their children die. Those who selected for capability, regardless of its moral packaging, passed their genes forward. You carry those genes. She carries those genes. The modern woman consciously believes she wants an emotionally available partner who respects her boundaries and validates her feelings. Her ancient brain is running different calculations entirely. It is asking, if society collapsed tomorrow, would this man ensure my survival? Would he take what we need? Would he eliminate threats without hesitation? The cruel man signals yes. The kind man signals uncertainty. This is why women often describe their attraction to dangerous men as confusing, irrational, something they cannot control. It is not a choice. It is a biological response to survival indicators that no amount of conscious reasoning can override. There's a third mechanism, the most disturbing of all. Buss documented it extensively, but rarely spoke of it publicly. It is called intrasexual competition elimination. A woman's unconscious mind evaluates men partially, based on their effect on other men, not their kindness toward other men, their dominance over other men, their ability to reduce competition, acquire status, and establish hierarchy. The cruel man demonstrates this capacity constantly. He diminishes rivals. He refuses to yield status. He operates with a frame so solid that other men instinctively defer. This triggers a cascade of attraction that the woman cannot consciously explain. She simply knows that when he enters a room, something shifts. Other men become smaller, less significant, less visible. Evolutionary psychology calls this prestige detection. The female brain is scanning for the man who other men fear, respect, or envy. The man who occupies the top of invisible hierarchies. The man whose social presence creates gravitational distortion. Cruelty is not the only path to this status, but it is the fastest path, the most visible path, the path that requires no explanation or justification. Consider Cesare Borgia, the illegitimate son of a pope who became the most feared man in Renaissance Italy. Machiavelli used him as the model for the prince, not because of his kindness, but because of his effective brutality. Contemporary accounts describe women competing for his attention despite or because of his reputation for murder, manipulation, and mercilessness. The Countess of Fori, Caterina Sforza, was said to have been drawn to him even as he besieged her fortress. The woman's brain registered something simple. This man defeats other men. This man is not defeated. This man occupies the apex. In a world where a woman's survival often depended on her mate's position in male hierarchies, attraction to the hierarchy-dominant man was not a preference. It was a survival imperative. Now, the mechanism I warned you about. The darkest layer of this psychology. Buss called it conditional cruelty preference. Most researchers refuse to discuss it directly because of its implications. It works like this. A woman's attraction to cruelty is not absolute. It is conditional on a specific perception that the cruelty serves her interests. When the cruel man eliminates her competition, she is attracted. When he destroys her enemies, she is aroused. When he refuses kindness to others while reserving it for her, she is addicted. The cruelty becomes proof of her special status. She is the exception. She is the one he protects. She is the one who receives what others are denied. This is why jealousy, when properly calibrated, amplifies attraction rather than destroying it. When he displays coldness toward other women who approach him, he is communicating something primal. You're mine. Others are irrelevant. This is why possessiveness in controlled doses registers as proof of value rather than threat. His unwillingness to share signals that she is worth fighting for. This is why the man who would harm others to protect her is more attractive than the man who would harm no one. Because the capacity for violence in her service becomes the ultimate declaration of her worth. The ordinary man thinks that being kind to everyone demonstrates his quality. He believes universal warmth makes him safe and attractive. What it actually communicates is something far less appealing. You're not special. I treat everyone this way. My kindness to you requires no selection, no choice, no investment. The strategic man understands that his cruelty toward the world, combined with his devotion to her, creates a psychological cocktail more addictive than any drug. She becomes the exception in a world of rules. The one soft space in an otherwise hard existence, the single point of light in his darkness. And that contrast, that is symmetry. That is what creates obsessive attachment. And there is an application here, not for becoming cruel, but for understanding what cruelty communicates and finding alternative signals that trigger the same responses. The cruel man communicates four things simultaneously. He communicates capability. The willingness to harm proves the ability to protect. The alternative signal demonstrated competence in high-stakes situations. Visible evidence that you can handle conflict, pressure, opposition without crumbling. He communicates selectivity. His coldness to others makes his warmth to her valuable. The alternative signal, standard so high that your attention itself becomes a prize, rejecting what does not meet your criteria visibly and without apology. He communicates outcome independence. His lack of remorse proves he's not controlled by others' opinions. The alternative signal, genuine indifference to approval, visible comfort with being disliked, refusal to modify yourself or acceptance. He communicates hierarchy dominance. His effect on other men proves his position. The alternative signal, natural command in group settings, the assumption of leadership without asking permission, the presence that reorganizes rooms. You do not need to impale your enemies. You need to communicate the same underlying traits through different behavioral expressions. The man who walks away from a negotiation rather than accept bad terms. The man who fires an underperforming employee without emotional hesitation. The man who wins a friendship that violates his standards without looking back. The man who holds firm when tested and refuses to justify himself when challenged. These behaviors trigger the same neural pathways as observable cruelty. They communicate the same evolutionary information. I'm capable of prioritizing outcomes over feelings. I'm capable of hardness when hardness is required. I'm not soft. I'm not weak. I'm not safe in the way that weak things are safe. This is what David Buss understood, and what most men never grasp. Women are not attracted to cruelty itself. They are attracted to what cruelty signals about survival capability. The kind man who cannot say no communicates weakness. The kind man who chooses kindness from a position of strength communicates something entirely different. His kindness becomes meaningful precisely because his hardness is possible. Let me tell you about the warlord's bride problem. Anthropologists observe this pattern across dozens of pre-industrial societies. When a conquering warlord took a village, the women rarely resisted integration into his household. Often they competed for his attention, despite having watched him kill their previous protectors. The cold evolutionary logic: the previous protectors lost. They were not capable of protection. The warlord proved capability through victory. Transferring allegiance to the victor was not betrayal. It was survival optimization. Modern women carry the same neural architecture. It operates below consciousness, below morality, below preference. When they encounter a man who demonstrates the capacity to dominate conflict, something ancient activates. This is why the corporate executive who ruthlessly eliminates competitors attracts female attention, that confuses his kind-hearted colleague. This is why the trial attorney who destroys witnesses on the stand goes home with a different woman each month while his gentle associate goes home alone. This is why the entrepreneur who fires without sentiment builds a personal life that his empathetic counterpart cannot replicate. The behaviors are different. The underlying signal is identical. I can win. I can take. I will not be stopped by guilt or sentiment or social pressure. This signal is more attractive than kindness, humor, than intelligence, than physical appearance, because in the ancestral environment, all other traits were worthless if you could not survive long enough to use them. There is a fourth mechanism Buss identified. He called it emotional intensity addiction. The cruel man creates emotional volatility, highs and lows, unpredictable rewards, moments of coldness followed by sudden warmth. This pattern does not repel women. It neurochemically enslaves them. Dopamine, the molecule of desire, does not respond to consistent pleasure. It responds to unpredictable pleasure. The gambling addict is not addicted to winning. They are addicted to the uncertainty of winning, the anticipation, the variable schedule of reward. The cruel man naturally creates this pattern. His affection cannot be predicted. His attention cannot be earned through reliable means. Every moment of warmth feels like a victory precisely because it was not guaranteed. The kind man offers consistent warmth, no valleys, no peaks, no neurochemical spikes. His affection is reliable, available, predictable, and predictable affection triggers no dopamine response whatsoever. This is the biological trap. Women consciously want stability. Their neurochemistry craves chaos. They say they want the reliable man. Records suggest he would ignore his wives for weeks during campaigns, then return with intense focus and lavish gifts. The emotional starvation followed by sudden abundance created bonds that rational treatment never could. His wives did not merely tolerate him, they worshipped him. They competed for his attention with a fervor that confused outside observers. How could women love a man responsible for 40 million deaths? Because his cruelty was never directed at them. Because his unpredictability created addiction. Because his power communicated survival guarantee. Because being chosen by him, even briefly, meant being chosen by the most dominant man alive. Now you understand the architecture, protection paradox, resource acquisition signals, intersexual dominance, conditional cruelty, emotional intensity addiction. 5 mechanisms, 5 evolutionary programs, 5 reasons why the cruel man wins battles he should lose. But understanding is not enough. The strategic application requires nuance most men cannot execute because there is a line, invisible but absolute, between attractive darkness and repulsive abuse. Cross it, and everything reverses. The cruel man who turns his cruelty inward toward her triggers not attraction but terror. The protection paradox only functions when she feels like the protected exception. The moment she becomes a target, the ancient brain recategorizes him from protector to threat. This is why the most successful dark personalities maintain an internal boundary they never cross. Ruthless to the world, devoted to her, hard with everyone, soft with one. The asymmetry is everything. Consider this carefully. She wants to feel special, not through words. Words are cheap through observable contrast, through watching you operate with coldness, while knowing she receives something different through seeing what you are capable of, and knowing she is exempt. The practical application: develop genuine standards that you enforce without apology. Reject what does not serve you. Eliminate people who waste your time. Operate with efficiency that some will call cold, but reserve warmth, real warmth, not performed warmth, for those who earn access to your inner circle. She watches how you treat the waiter, not because kindness matters, but because contrast matters. If you are warm to everyone, your warmth to her means nothing. If you are selective, reserved, economical with your approval, then your warmth becomes currency of immense value. There is one final truth, Buss documented, that most will never accept. Women do not want to be treated as equals by the men they desire most. This is not about rights. This is not about respect. This is about erotic polarity. Equality is comfortable. Equality is safe. Equality is also sexually dead. The cruel man does not ask permission. He does not seek consensus. He does not treat the relationship as a democracy. He leads. He decides. He takes responsibility for outcomes without consulting committees. This triggers submission responses that terrify the modern woman because she's been taught to reject them. She feels the pull towards surrender and fights it. She feels the desire to yield and resist it. The internal conflict itself becomes arousing because it is forbidden. The kind man who treats her as an equal receives her respect, perhaps her friendship, rarely her desire. The man who leads without apology, who embodies authority without performing it, who creates a reality she can enter but not control. He receives something deeper than respect. He receives surrender. And surrender for the feminine psyche is where desire lives. This is not about domination. It is about polarity. It is about the erotic charge that flows between masculine direction and feminine reception. The cruel man stumbles into this dynamic naturally because he does not care enough to equalize. The strategic man cultivates it consciously because he understands the architecture. So, where does this leave you? Not with a prescription for cruelty. Cruelty without capability is weakness wearing a mask. Cruelty without selectivity is abuse. Cruelty without warmth reserved for her is simply harm. What you take from this is structural understanding. The traits that attract are not the traits society celebrates. The behaviors that create obsessive attachment are not the behaviors dating coaches recommend. The psychology of female desire operates on ancient code that modern morality cannot rewrite. You can resist this knowledge. You can insist that kindness should be enough. You can demand that women want what they claim to want. Or you can see clearly the man who protects ruthlessly, who acquires relentlessly, who dominates naturally, who reserves his softness for one and one alone, who creates emotional intensity through unpredictability, who leads without permission. This man does not chase. He is chased. This man does not convince. He is chosen. This man does not explain himself. He is understood at a level deeper than language. David Buss spent his career documenting what happens in female psychology when this man enters the room. What he found disturbed him enough that he couched his findings in academic language designed to obscure their power. But you now see through that obscuring. You understand the evolutionary logic. You recognize the mechanisms. The question is not whether this knowledge is comfortable. The question is whether you will use it to become more strategically effective in how you present yourself to the world. Here is what will haunt you after this ends. Every woman you have ever wanted and lost, there was a man she chose instead. And that man, whether consciously or not, was triggering the mechanisms you now understand. He was communicating protection capability. He was signaling resource acquisition. He was demonstrating hierarchy dominance. He was creating emotional intensity. He was doing what evolution designed women to respond to. You were doing what society trained you to do. The gap between those two approaches is the gap between success and failure in the mating market. Not because society is wrong about morality, but because society is wrong about psychology, about what actually works versus what should work in a fair universe. The universe is not fair. Evolution is not moral. Female desire is not rational. Once you accept this, you stop fighting against reality and start moving with it. There's a thought I want to leave you with. It will circle in your mind tonight when the distractions fade. The cruel man is not successful because he is cruel. He is successful because cruelty signals traits that evolution hardwired women to seek. The traits can be signaled through other means that do not require you to become something monstrous. Strength without malice, authority without abuse, selectivity without contempt, unpredictability without chaos, leadership without tyranny. The question that should keep you awake: which version of masculine power will you embody? The accidental cruelty of men who do not understand themselves, or the strategic intensity of men who have mastered the architecture of desire? The woman watching you right now, across the room, across the table, across the years you have known each other, is waiting to see which man you become. She will never tell you this. She cannot. She does not have the language for what her ancient brain is calculating. But she is calculating, and the answer will determine everything. If this fractured something you believed, if you felt the ground shift beneath comfortable assumptions, then you are the kind of viewer this channel exists for. We do not offer reassurance here. We offer sight. Subscribe if you want to keep seeing. The cruelest trick evolution played on the kind man was letting him believe kindness was the answer. It was never about kindness. It was about power. And power, properly understood, changes the man who wields it and the woman who witnesses it.